to start this off, and I was trying to come up with a joke. There aren't any good jokes, but I was like, is there something about how American publishing was conglomerating over the last 60 years while the Balkans were balkanizing? Is this a thing I can talk about? I don't think so. I don't know where the punchline is.
Yeah. Balkanize is a funny sounding word, funnier sounding than it is in practice.
I imagine so, yeah. I think I remember the first, I went through a weird Bosnian War reading project like 10 years ago. And I remember trying to figure out when the first incidence of the word had been, to separate. I think it was around the teens, maybe, in The Nation magazine.
I'll take your word on that. That makes sense, though. I mean, because they've always been thought of as this, as a region, and for good reason. But then they're all obviously the distinctive cultures and countries within them, especially post Yugoslavia. So it's a fascinating part of the world, and something, not to jump the gun here, but something that's so cool about A Cat at the End of the World is how Robert is writing about Dalmatia. This book is ultimately about present day southern Croatia, but it was the crossroads of history, dating back to antiquity, and it is I think a lot of people, a lot of American readers, don't know that or haven't thought about it. They haven't embarked on a kind of reading project that you're just talking about, Jeff, of trying to track down these threads of history. And I think that Robert does a really nice job of doing that. And without making it, his other novels and certainly the stories in Horror and Huge Expenses, they're very Croatian and very, of post-war contemporary 21st century Croatia, late 20th century Croatia. And this is not that. But it's also, it's an immensely, he's writing from a place of incredible pride for his homeland. And he is from Split. He is from the southern, he lives in Zagreb, but he's from Split. So this, he's talking about his backyard. And this is what he grew up with.
Yeah, I think I generally only think of Dalmatia as like a wine and citrus region when I think of the word at all.
Yeah, of course. And
or dogs, maybe dogs.
In Game of Thrones.
Oh, was it filmed there?
A lot of it was.
Huh. Because I was like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I thought that was an entirely fictional place. All right. Christy,
well, yeah, we've started, so yeah.
Oh, I didn't know we had started. I thought we were just making chit chat.
No, I think we're go for it.
Well, I mean, in the realm of what we were talking about, literature and translation is very often treated as a monolithic thing. Javier's known me since I was a little boy, and I thought that literature and translation was all things. Like, that was the only genre I needed to read because I thought it was a genre. So, the literatures of like hundreds of nations butting up against each other in catalogs is the way we get them, from like Dalkey and New Directions and Deep Vellum, and no real idea of, a place. And so beginning with books from the former Yugoslavia, Buzz, you're going to have to help me out here. Is it Ivan Sersin?
Ivan Sersin, yes.
Ivan Sersin. Yeah, mostly from side to side, Javier. Yeah, the two of these two guys have been publishing books from a specific region, with the exception of one excellent Nigerian book, which I'm curious about how that happened, but we'll get there when we get there. And they've been giving us a coherent sense of a very, confusing place, but through literature. And I'm excited, and so is one of my friends and favorite booksellers, Josh Cook. And I think I first met Josh as an author, to be honest, maybe. But I hardly ever go to Boston anymore without looking him up for a few drinks and everything on the menu. And if you follow him on Twitter or you've met him in a bar, he's pretty much one of the smartest and most decent observers of the business of books I know. And we invited him here to ask Buzz a few questions. I'm going to turn you all over to Josh for now.
Thank you so much, Jeff. A fact that will not be relevant to anyone else here besides myself and Jeff, but there was just a massive rainstorm in Somerville about 10 minutes ago, right before this started. So thank you, Jeff, for inviting me to ask some questions. Thank you, Buzz, for the work that you do. We're going to be talking primarily about A Cat at the End of the World today, but Buzz, if there's anything else you want to add about Sandorf, about that wonderful collection of short stories that I staff picked and love that Jeff referenced, feel free to cram any answer you want into my questions.
Okay.
So the first one, there's a little front matter beginning of A Cat at the End of the World, a little introduction by Nell Zink, and then a little bit more of a kind of a preface from Buzz himself. Buzz, can you tell that little story about how you met the author's work and how that kind of led to Sandorf? Because I think that really encapsulated a lot of what the spirit of small and independent publishing is.
Absolutely. And, my whole career in publishing has been with small independent presses. And I was in Frankfurt at the book fair 12, maybe 13 years ago with Mark Batty Publisher doing a lot of illustrated books. And I met Ivan Sursin there. He stopped by the stand, it had caught his eye. We started talking, we hit it off. And then we saw each other again in London the following year and just had this kind of standing, as you do at these events, it just becomes part of like a standing date. And at Mark Batty, my main goal was not acquiring fiction, but then I became the managing director of Black Balloon Publishing, which is now an imprint of Catapult. And I was able to start acquiring fiction, and I wanted to focus on work in translation because as a reader, it had always pulled me in. And so I got in touch with Yvonne, and one thing led to another, and we published the North American edition of Our Man in Iraq, which was Robert's first novel. It had been published in the UK, so I was able to read it all at the time, and I liked it, but really wanted to overhaul it. And Robert and Yvonne gave me permission to do that, and that book went on to great critical acclaim here. It got blurbed in the New Yorker, well, not blurbed, reviewed in the New Yorker, reviewed everywhere on NPR and all of that. And then I was involved with the manuscript of No Signal Area, which was published by Seven Stories Press. And then as a result of our ongoing collaborations, Yvonne and I wrote grants for the a European Union grant, which has basically helped launch Sandorf Passage. And and it's been such a joy to work so closely with Robert on so many projects, and to have, I would say he trusts me, trusts Yvonne certainly, and to, be able to kind of shepherd his short story collection, which we released this previous November, Horror and Huge Expenses, which is, I think, stellar, and then Cat at the End of the World, which I am just so excited about on kind of so many levels. But first and foremost, because I think it's an incredible book, and I think it's singular in its approach to kind of peeling away the layers on what human relationships are and how we've kind of come up with this sense of identity of self over time, and as told through Kalia, who is this runaway slave, and a cat he befriends, and moving to a new island, which is Illyria in historical terms, which later, as I was saying earlier, is present day Dalmatia and Croatia, and the building of a kind of this attempt at a utopian apokia, this home away from home. And I think Robert's done something really special here, and is told with the sense of a parable. I think it's incredibly accessible, but also profoundly ingenious, for embodying not only this boy, this Kalia, the runaway slave, who in the time that the reader knows him, learns to read, befriends his cat, travels across the sea, and kind of finds himself, and then also this scatterwind, which is this incredible bodiless spirit that is moves through time and space and comes into the present day, goes back in time, is on the African savannas, is everywhere, and offers just incredible insight into human behavior, and especially in terms of how it's been shaped by slavery, war, colonization, trade.
Yeah, that's great. What I love and what I think that's important about the kind of the story of Sandorf is you started with the literature first and then got to the publishing. Like the book and the creation led to the mechanism of getting that creation out into wider readers. Ask about the Scatterwind voice, because in some ways this book spans several thousand years. There's some tight focus, there's some broad focus. We're talking through the internet at times. We're kind of at the kind of very dawn of what we consider Western civilization. And sometimes it seems to me that books with that kind of big, expansive scope are often the best at telling us very small truths. You know, those kind of pocket-sized truths that we miss in the context of like our day-to-day lives. When we have this kind of broad perspective, we can see them. And so you can say that's BS and talk about something else. Or what small truth, if you agree with that, kind of what small truth do you think there is from the broad perspective in A Cat at the End of the World?
That's a great question. I think there are a lot of them, actually. And I think the Scatterwind has an abundance of them and delivers them with great regularity. But one that pops right to mind is from early on in the book, where Mew, the cat at the end of the world, these have been brought from Egypt at this time, and they're just being domesticated. And it is for all the Syracusans, the wealthy, to have a cat as a status symbol. And so a cat comes into the house of Sabas. Sabas is the owner of Kalia. And Sabas has a boy the same age as Kalia, Pigros, and they're like frenemies because they run around and play together, except when Pigros decides he wants to be the master and is a jerk to Kalia. And Kalia accepts that kind of way of life because that's how it's supposed to be. The gods have selected these people to be the masters and the rest of them to be slaves. And he had never questioned that. Mew comes into the house, and it's very clear that the cat prefers Kalia over Pigros. And for Kalia, this is this light bulb moment where everything he'd been told, he'd always accepted because he'd been told that, and it kind of played out. But here he sees for the first time ever that this cat is ignoring the way of the gods, the will of the gods. And for him, that's the first kind of sets off this chain of events of him eventually running away. So I think the truth being that truth is subjective, and that's a really you need, it can be a slippery slope, and just because someone says it's true doesn't mean it is. And that the how we arrive at the truth is complex, but also it kind of just that's a simple truth. So that's one that comes to mind. If that answers your question.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we all know, but has impact when we are reminded of it in certain ways. Kind of around there, a little before there, the Scatterwind voice talks a little bit about what they've learned about humans, and specifically about our senses, that we can't smell anything, we can't hear anything, we can't feel anything. They basically describe humans as senseless. And, we also start to see Kalia learning to read at about that same time. And it occurs to me that there might be this thread where that language is in fact one of our senses. And I'm wondering what you think about that, and how that kind of moves throughout the rest of the book as we see Kalia make choices and tell stories, and as we see Scatterwind make choices and tell stories, and what that idea of language as a sense, like hearing and seeing, kind of might mean for the story.
Well, I think that's a great point. And Scatterwind later on talks about language as being a virus, really. And so that I think it is a sense, and it is because of course language colors our understanding of the world, and in the same way that you can manipulate truth via language, that's a sense. You can manipulate how something tastes the way you season it, and you can make something sweet, salty, and vice versa. And so language is imperative here, because for one, the Scatterwind has never really spoken before, and that's something is kind of mulling over throughout the course of the book. Is he's not quite sure why he has started to speak, but part of it is certainly because he has made this decision to shadow Kalia and Mew, which is something he had not done before. We learn at various points in the book about one very profound experience or observation for the Scatterwind was watching zebras on the African savanna somewhere, and seeing how mothers and children and offspring behaved, and then what happened when the predators came in, but also the Scatterwind realizing these are animals without spoken language, but they have their own languages, and that is their own sense of their own sense. And as he watched humans develop, he, as you say, Josh, he basically had written humans off for having no sense of smell or hearing until he saw that they learned how to sail. And that for him was something like, oh, maybe these humans are on to something. But then he also realizes how they use language then to moralize and to decide that they are better, and that they in fact are the inheritors of the earth, and that everything is to bend to their will, which is a crucial theme in this book.
So I've got one more for you, and then I think we're going to hear about some other titles. And basically, I'm just going to ask you a question so that you can do our bookseller's job for us. Who is the perfect reader for a cat at the end of the world?
I think anyone who is looking for a story that is full of these little truths and is accessible and is fun. Obviously cat people, but the book I've been thinking about a lot in relation to this is Matrix, Lauren Groff's Matrix. And the reason for that is because she took a book about a medieval nunnery and made it about and created a character who is essentially a 21st century superwoman. And there is such resonance there with a reader today in that book of these, hundreds of years ago. I feel that The Cat at the End of the World is the same book. It is not the same book, but it achieves the same thing in that taking this story of antiquity and making it incredibly resonant today. And it is something that you can kind of fall into. There is a plot. There is something worth turning the pages for, because you do want to see what happens at the end. It is not just a vague book of ideas, but it is chock full of incredibly rich ideas. And I think they're told really creatively. And, my hope is that this is a book that appeals to an incredibly wide swath of readers, because I think it has a little something for everyone.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Buzz, for answering my questions and for putting books like this out. I'm very much enjoying it. You veteran booksellers probably know I read just enough to make sure I could do some questions for this presentation, but I'm looking forward to the rest of it. And I'm just going to give a plug for All Shades of Iberibi, the short story collection that Jeff mentioned. Just fantastic. So thank you all again. Thank you, Buzz. Thank you, Jeff and Chris, for inviting me. And I'm going to pass it over now.
Okay, well, thank you, Josh, and thank you, everyone. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions. One quick thing just for the booksellers, if you have your ARCs, and if you don't, let us know, or, we have more. The typography is going to be slightly different. This book is going to bulk out to about 376 pages, maybe even 390. Not changing the price. The barcode is good. Nothing, but just FYI, when you're thinking about it, it's going to be it's a nice little chunky thing. Are there any other questions or anything else?
I don't have mine yet, Buzz. I want a copy.
Yours on the way.
Yeah, my box came a couple days ago.
Okay, fantastic. Julia, yours should be there soon as well.
I can't wait.
Oh,
So I-
Amanda had a question for you, Buzz. What's the art on the front?
The art is from the Met, and it's an old. I'm the designer hasn't sent me the actual kind of credit information yet, so I can't tell you the artist, but it is from the Met.
So Jeff, I sort of front loaded the newly in stock kind of bestseller Sandorfs so that we could maybe talk about these two, and then we'll let Buzz go and kind of run through the rest of our non-Sandorf new releases bestseller sort of stuff. What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Why not? Why not?
Okay.
So,
Unless we want Buzz to talk about them.
well, yeah, I mean, Buzz, are you interested in telling us about how, war, child abandonment, alcoholism, and mental illness are, good fodder for comedy? Because that's what I was going to say about this book.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I think Radio Siga is a brilliant book. It's a debut from Ivan Vidak, and it's Matt Robinson's first translation actually of a literary work, and I think he just nailed it. I think the voice here is of a kind of classical literature approach, but with incredible dark humor. Kalman is the protagonist. He is kind of this layabout. He drinks too much rakia. He gets struck by lightning. World War II is kind of coming to a head, and he is fighting off the Germans and getting drunk the whole time until he gets hospitalized and falls in love with a female Russian soldier, and then he ends up wronging her, and it's one kind of tragedy of error after tragedy
Sounds
of
like
error.
Madison Cawthorn.
Yeah, yeah. And it got a nice review in Publishers Weekly, and Tobias Carroll wrote about it in his latest watch list for Words Without Borders.
Incidentally, on the topic of Radio Siga, a couple of smart booksellers on the West Coast, Spencer Rucci at third place, and Justin Walls, who's at, currently, I guess he's working for Bookshop. We're talking about this book today on Twitter, and they said, it's imperative you understand that Radio Siga prominently features a lightning-powered erection, and this isn't even the first book in the magical penis subgenre to be read by these guys.
I didn't see that, but I know that they put it on their book club, which is
the Dumois book club, I guess they call it.
Yeah, so it's in great company. So I really appreciate that from them, and all the support we've had from booksellers in our short time here. Neon South is a kind of it's a travelogue through Latin America, Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia, and Mexico. Marko Pogačar is a prominent Croatian writer, best known as a poet. His book, Dead Letter Office, his poetry collection, Dead Letter Office, was a shortlisted for the National Translation Award last year. And this is kind of this running prose poetry through these countries and just drinking it all in. Kind of an on the road sort of flair to it, but really actually much more poetic than that. And it really is most compelling, I think, in how Marko draws a lot of similarities between the ripple effects of colonialism and globalization in Latin America with everything that he witnessed happening in the former Yugoslavia, starting in the late 80s into the early 90s. And this got a great review in Asymptote not that long ago, and we have some other press simmering on that as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Buzz. I kept you longer than I
Oh,
that I
I'm
would.
pleasure to be here, but I know you guys have other stuff to do. Well, again, thank you everyone for
Thanks a
everything.
lot, Buzz.
I'm really excited about I'm excited about the whole list. I do believe that backlist is a silly term. You know, these are all new books to people who've never read them before. But I am so excited about Cat at the End of the World. Please let me know if you have any questions. You can email me. And I look forward to seeing you all down the road.
I always say backlist is a capitalist lie.
That's right. Amen. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Buzz. All right, so we're gonna run through some newly